Hey, hey, hey. Okay, so we are going to cover the second part of chapter 13, all about different types of structures and all about how like the earth has moved, and that's how we get all these different types of organisms that came from a common ancestor all around the world. It's super freaking cool. Can't wait for this. And here we go. I'm sharing my screen. Okay, so like I said, second part of chapter 13. Okay, so biogeography considers species geographical locations. All right, meaning that biogeography, where living things live, where they actually are physically located. So Earth's geography has changed drastically over the last 200 million years. So we know somewhere between 280 and 200 million years ago, all of the continents were joined into one supercontinent called Pangaea. Okay, after we had Pangaea, we have this shifting. Okay, we have this shifting from these continents away from each other around 181 to 135 million years ago. You have this break and two major continents form. We've got Laurasia and Gondwana. Now, 100 to 65, well, I guess 65 to 100 million years ago, you have the present day continents. They're all separated, but they're not in its present day configuration. So they're going to continue drifting apart to what we have today as those continents have drifted apart. And now, now we're here. All right, so why do the continents move? Have you heard of plate tectonics? You should. So the theory of plate tectonics says that Earth's surface has these rigid layers underneath like Earth's crust that are just moving. And they literally, you can measure how much they move in a year. Okay, there are scientists who measure that constantly because, all right, plate tectonics move in response to forces acting deep within the planet. So you know that under Earth's crust, you have all of this like bubbling. It is like all sorts of shit is happening. You have these convection cells. You've got all sorts of crazy things happening under the Earth. So the plate tectonics are moving with all of this, like the under stuff for Earth. And they're also going to be, as they move, they're going to affect things up on like Earth's terrain, right? If you think about volcanoes, or if you think about like earthquakes, all of those things are happening because you have plate tectonics interacting with each other. Okay, and so you know of fault lines, you know of where volcanoes are, you know all sorts of these things that are going to actually affect the terrain. All right, so you've got active volcanoes, plate tectonics, and the ring of fire. So here is your ring of fire, and basically you have all of these like faults, okay? You have all of these faults. We know of the San Andreas Fault. We have another fault that goes right by Memphis, Tennessee. That's gonna be a bad one in, who knows, 100 years, 1,000 years, who really fucking knows. But you have all of these plates, okay? Pacific plate, Antarctic plate, African plate, all of these plates. And as they are moving, sometimes they will go like this, and now you've got a trench. Sometimes they will go like this, and you've got a volcano. Sometimes they'll go like this, and you get an earthquake, okay? So all of these things are happening beneath the surface of Earth, and that is causing all of these continents to just constantly be shifting. And we can actually see, I mentioned this a second ago, how much these plates are actually moving, because you can see, like, what state is it that they do this in? I don't actually know if it's in North America or if it's like Greenland or something like that. I don't know. I haven't looked into this in a long time. But talk about how every year a whole continent moves like a couple of inches. That doesn't sound like a big deal, except for the fact, okay, we are Americans. We are very individualistic instead of collectivistic. We like to think about ourselves, very selfish country. I mean, it just is the truth. I don't know if you know about history or not. So if you just think about like our continent moving a couple of inches, cool, not a very big deal. However, you've got all these freaking plates all around the world. So what that means is basically you have triggering of these faults more and more and more often. Okay, not great, not great. All right, so going back to talking about biogeography, how when you have all of these continents sort of drifting apart, you end up with a lot of these islands. So between Asia and Australia, you have what is known as Wallace's Line, okay? So right between, okay, there are all of these islands. You've got the Philippines, you've got Borneo, you've got all of these places. And in between them, there is this trench, okay? And just the fact, they call it Wallace's Line because the big mammals over here, okay, on this side of Wallace's Line, cannot move over to this side of Wallace's Line. And the opposite is true too. So animals on either side of Wallace's Line have been separated for millions of years, evolving independently. The result is a unique variety of organisms on each side of the line. So if you look at the red side, okay, on this side of the left side of Wallace's Line, these organisms are going to look more like that they are from Asia. Okay, so you've got tigers, rhinos, elephants, orangutans, bears, leopards, et cetera, versus if you go on this right side of Wallace's Line, these organisms look more like they're from Australia, okay? More like the evolutionary lineages that come out of Australia. We've got these sugar gliders, tree kangaroos, deers, cockatoos, honeysuckers, brush turkeys. So even though at one time, every one of these continents was the supercontinent Pangaea, you have this slow shifting where they break apart, and then this slow shifting where they are just drifting away from each other. And now you have millions of years in between these, when these species were all together at the same time. That allows them to evolve independently. Okay, so say that you had bears over here and over here, okay? And say that they could interbreed, say that they could reproduce with one another. Would you have independent evolution? No, you wouldn't, because they would be able to sort of do this migration. However, because you have this physical separation, it would allow both of those bear populations to evolve independently. So that's freaking amazing. All right, so what we've talked about so far: fossils help scientists piece together Earth's history. We talked about that in the last video, as well as with continents shifting, the age of the Earth, era, and eon distinctions in the last video, mass extinction events. Shoot, I didn't point out the mass extinction events to y'all. All right, well, if you go back to the eon era period like table that I was talking to you about, the Cambrian explosions, you have these little dots, and they're mass extinction events, okay? Those are huge events that define particular eras, and they're really important. Now, I'm not gonna ask you about specific names of them, but yeah, they're just cool to look at. So, Earth has drastically changed due to plate tectonics, earthquakes, volcanoes. Changing geography limits species ranges. So that is going to have this evolutionary diversification. You have speciation, meaning if you have a population here that is no longer able to communicate with a population over here, they're going to change. They're not going to be like each other for much longer because they both have different selective pressures in that environment. Speciation, macroevolution. Hello. All right, now we're going to talk about like structures. We're going to talk about structures, anatomical structures. Okay, so anatomical relationships reveal common descent. So you have what are called homologous structures that reveal these similarities between organisms that are not necessarily closely related, but they do share a common ancestry. Okay, so for instance, all of these animals have similar bones in their forelimbs, okay? So they're colored. They're colored, and the homologous parts, even if it doesn't look exactly the same, like this lion's looks very different from this bat's, but the entire configuration is exactly the same. You have one of these upper bones, you've got two of these sort of middle bones, and then you have a wrist like this, like this, like this, and then you got your phalanges, your fingers, okay? Even the bat, it only has, well, so it's got this little one protruding, and then it's got all of these in its freaking wing. How crazy is that? So, similar bones in their forelimbs, they reflect common ancestry. That makes sense because they're mammals. So mammals, you've got different selective pressures on different mammals, and they go down their own evolutionary trajectories. However, they all kept the overall configuration of their bones. Similarities suggest that their common ancestor had this bone configuration. Homologous structures do not need to have the same function, and they do not have to look exactly alike. So this configuration in a bat looks very different from that of a human's, or that of us seals. Is this just a seal? Like, I don't really know. I'm a plant person. I don't really know. Like, there's a picture later. Like, I thought it was a shark for so long, and then I was like, is that a gar? Is it just like what's between a shark? It doesn't look like a shark or a dolphin, but it's not like a fish. Listen, I don't know what, I don't know how any of these organisms. I'm like, I need to read like a kid's book. Okay. Don't have to look exactly the same at all or have the same function. So for instance, the function that this bat uses with this bone configuration is to help it fly. Are we flying with that same bone configuration? No. Okay, so different functions, but overall similar structure. That's because they have different selective pressures in each animal's evolutionary line that led to small changes from their ancestors' bone structure. Different ways in the way they used it, different ways in the way they looked, okay? They don't have to all look the same to be homologous. Now we have vestigial structures. Vestigial structures are when they're structures that, oh, this was actually what I was talking about when I was like, I don't know, is this does it say down here? No. I don't know. Is it a whale? It's not a shark. It's not a dolphin. Maybe it is a whale. I don't know. Maybe it's a whale. And I was looking at this earlier and I was like, how am I going to talk about this? What the fuck kind of animal is that? So sorry about it. But vestigial structures are ones that have lost their functions. Okay. They literally serve almost no functioning whatsoever. All right, has lost its function, but is homologous to a functional structure in another species. So for instance, you have these vestigial femurs in okay, and it's the same thing over here. Why the F does this, we're just gonna call it a whale. Why does it need this whole sort of structure? It actually doesn't. It doesn't use it. So it's a vestigial structure, but it's homologous to something in a related species. Now, what kinds of vestigial structures do you have? You have plenty. Think about your wisdom teeth. Do you use your wisdom teeth? No, most people get them taken out. If you think about your tailbone, your appendix, like, do we actually use those things? Could we live without those things? Yes, 100%. Do we really use them? No. Like, okay, so your tailbone, for instance, I say that we don't need it. There are muscles down, like, in your pelvis that attach to your coccyx, which is your tailbone. So like, but does it do it? Like, no. Okay, so vestigial structures. Here is a video that I encourage you to watch. It is excellent talking about vestigial structures. This is like available to you on Blackboard. It will probably help you with your quizzes. Got hiccups. Probably help you with your quizzes. Probably help you understand this stuff for exams. I encourage you to watch it. They're just, it's not that they're too long. Honestly, I'm just kind of hungry and I don't want to watch them right now. So if you can go watch those, that would be fab. Like, do I want to? Hold on. Just give me a second. Hold on. Let me see. Hold on. Let me see how long it is. So I can not be lazy.
Hello, people.
What? Did you hear that? What? Wait, I'm so confused. I'm so confused. I brought up that video in my browser and it showed up a video of me, like one of our classes videos. So I don't know what is going on my end. That was definitely a my computer thing and not a your computer thing. So just go and check that out for yourself, please. It's not a video from our class. It should just be a YouTube video. So listen, we're just gonna keep going. We're just gonna power through. So we talked about homologous structures with same, like shared ancestry. We talked about vestigial structures, which also have a shared ancestry, but that have fallen out of use, okay? And now we're gonna talk about analogous structures that, listen, analogous structures do not have common ancestry, okay? Do not have common ancestry. So anatomical structures are analogous if they're superficially similar, but did not derive from a common ancestor. So for instance, this shrimp and this like tick, I think it's like a water tick or something, a water bear, I don't know. They do not share this common ancestor, okay? They did not get their traits from this common ancestor. They arrived at them independently, which we're gonna talk about right now. So in these examples, none of these cave animals have pigment and they don't have eyes. That's important because if you're in a cave and there's no light at all, are you gonna be able to see? No, there's no light, you will not be able to see. So would it be beneficial to have eyes? No, it wouldn't be beneficial for you to make eyes. How about pigment? Pigment can be like to warn predators, it can be to attract mates and things like that, but only if another organism is able to see you. If they're not, does pigment matter? No, it doesn't. So these similarities that all of these organisms have arose via convergent evolution, which produces similar structures in organisms that do not have the same lineage. So convergent evolution, you start at different lineages and you converge on the same traits. For instance, these converged into the same traits because they were in similar environments. Similar selective pressures put on these different lineages cause them to converge in the same, structure. So if you think another example of convergent evolution would be eyeballs in other species. So think about flies have eyes, okay? And they have these really interesting compound eyes. We also have eyes. So are they homologous structures or are they convergent evolution and analogous structures? So homologous or analogous structures. They're analogous because we do not share this, we didn't get our eyes from this common ancestor between us and flies, okay? They are separate structures that we each came about independently. Here is another excellent video that I encourage you to watch. I'm not going to bring it up in case it brings me up because that freaked my shit out. So lack of pigment arose independently in each of these cave animals because they had similar selective pressures that were in their different lineages. Analogous structures. Evolution does not always lead to greater complexity. This is important because does an organism need to be more and more complex in order to be better and better suited for its environment? No, sometimes the more things that you have to make, like the less fit you are. Would there be a reason for a snake to make 2 back legs? No, it would, like 2 back legs as if it has 2 front legs, but to make legs, no, it wouldn't. It would hold it back. So you have a use it or lose it situation. So snakes without limbs burrow more easily than those with limbs. In snakes, natural selection favors alleles that confer limblessness. So this snake having no limbs at all except for around here-ish, those vestigial femurs. In an environment without light, pigment provides no selective advantage. So if pigment is actually a greater energy cost, then organisms not producing skin pigment will be favored because they're saving energy on something that's not needed for them to make anyway. All right, the streamlined shapes of dolphins and sharks evolved independently, meaning that they were from different lineages. The body plan of these 2 animals are they homologous, vestigial, analogous, a product of convergent evolution, or both C and D. So homologous comes from shared ancestry, and this says they evolved independently, so it's not that. Vestigial means that they have structures that are not used in their body plans, okay? They certainly use their streamlined shapes to their advantage. So the streamlined shape is not a vestigial structure. Analogous structures mean that they came about from different lineages that had similar selective pressures on them, and they arrived at the same place because of those selective pressures. So it is analogous. A product of convergent evolution, yes. So analogous, if you have an analogous structure, it's from convergent evolution. So remember, those 2 lineages converge on this analogous structure because of those similar selective pressures. So really, the answer is E. Both C and D are correct. All right, embryonic development patterns provide us with evolutionary clues. So even organisms that maybe don't share a lot of similarities, obvious adult similarities will share really sort of striking similarities when they are embryos, okay, or when they are in the fetal stage, for instance, okay? So here we have chimpanzee skulls as a fetus and as an adult, and human skulls as a fetus as an adult. And if you can see, you have these like bone plates, these skull plates that have fused as adults, but there are spaces when you are, even right after you're born, guys, you have these bone plates that have not fused yet. So like talk about babies having like these soft heads, they literally do. So if you look at the adult structures, there are amazing similarities, but they of course also look completely different, right? But if you look at the fetal embryonic development of these skulls, I mean, it is strikingly similar, much more similar as fetuses than as adults. Can you name these animals? Okay, so these are all in the embryonic stages. And I'm just going to tell you, this is a fish, this is a mouse, and this is an alligator. And so I told you in one of my videos, I'm pregnant. And I can tell you that in the early stages of development, I'm actually going to show you. Fuck, why not? In the early stages of human babies, you probably have never seen this before, which is gonna be so cool. in the very early stages, like, let me scroll back to when it looked like this. Okay. If you can see this, guys, that's at week 5. So that's just a couple of weeks after a woman would even find out that she's pregnant, maybe a week after she finds out that she's pregnant. All of these have similar features and we will talk about them, but you can see this sort of, oh, it's getting all like bright. Come on. Okay, you can see this like spine. You can see this right here. Have you ever even seen that before? That it's called a yolk sac, which is going to nourish the embryo until the placenta takes over between like 10 to 12 weeks. This has a yolk sac. Here's a yolk sac. This is probably a little bit older, but maybe that's a yolk sac right there. So the development of all of these, look at that freaking amazing tail. Look at that. That will disappear actually pretty soon, but, and same thing for a mouse, right? It's not going to stick around with that tail, but even with these, look, you've got little arm buds here and here. Does a fish have arm buds? No. Got the little arm buds, and you can actually even see, I don't know if you can, because it's like really, hold on, it's doing like this bright thing. I don't know if you can see them right here and somewhere down like right there. You've got little arm and leg buds. Oh my gosh, all of these things look so similar based on their embryonic development. It's insane. It's also why I'm hungry all the time, is because I'm pregnant, but anyway. And why didn't I watch those videos? I'm like when is my meal time? I like have become a kid. I'm like, is it like snack time or okay. So we have homeotic genes that control an organism's development, and you can have small differences in the gene expression that can make huge differences to overall body plan. So here's a chick, and here is a python, okay? Embryos of little chicks and embryos of little pythons. And what I want you to notice are the areas of expression. So you've got homeotic gene A and homeotic gene B. They're overlapping in parts, but not overlapping in other parts. And where they are like absent, you're going to develop limbs, forelimbs and hind limbs. So you can see the hind limb right there. This looks just like my little baby at 5 weeks. It's crazy. You have forelimbs, the hind limbs. You got the drastically reduced in a chick. Okay. Then in a python, you have overlapping gene expression of A and B, meaning that there are going to be no like limbs. And then here you do have the absence of these homeotic genes in the like later area of that embryo. But remember that these hind limbs, does it need its hind limb? No, not at all. So the hind limbs will remain vestigial. So based on these overlapping parts, because they're overlapping, it takes over the place where the forelimbs would be, meaning that it has an overall different body plan, even though you have the same homeotic genes. So that is incredible. Homeotic genes therefore explain how very few key mutations might produce new species. How did we get here? You have different homeotic genes expressed in different ways. You have novel mutations that are going to cause new body plans, and then speciation happens. So literally the differences in homeotic genes between species are how we have this diversity of organisms in the world. It's pretty incredible. All right, guys. I hope I didn't scar you with pictures. I'll probably show you pictures through this entire term because I'm obsessed with it, as I should be. So hope you liked chapter 13. And yeah, I'm gonna go get something to eat. Have a great day.